Hi, welcome to Board Chair Leader Archetypes, Leadership to Elevate the Board. I'm DD Myers, and I have with me here today Peter Myers. We both just came off the America's Credit Union's Governmental Affairs Conference, where there's an exciting vibe through the whole convention. And we believe this is an ideal time with exciting innovations, the political environment, economy, AI, digital banking, everything that's going on in the market to talk about board chair archetypes. Last year, we did a segment on succession planning. We keep building the platform here to help with the board and their education and advancement. So what we're going to do today is talk about the roles and responsibilities above and beyond rules and minutes, archetypes of the board chair, and situations requiring board chair leadership. So let's get going. And a little background where we got going on this is many years ago we did some practical research, action research, academic research to look at how can we help boards transform? What does it require for a board to figure out, okay, we're doing well now, and how do we need to organize for the future? And we did some work that came out to be the transformative change model that we've been building off of every year, a catalyst to becoming a higher performing board chair, officer, and a board member. So we're excited to keep expanding that today as well. One of the things that we have also talked about here in the past is a board alignment assessment. The board alignment assessment is an awesome tool for the board to look at how are we governing the organization. And when you look at the results of the board alignment assessment, it takes the 8 areas of governance and helps the board look at how are we doing in these each areas of governance, and what do we enjoy the most, what is most productive, and what do we need to focus on going forward. So that's another segment that we do is a board alignment assessment. And today we're going to get into a little bit about the board chair archetypes, and Peter's going to set a foundation for us here.
Yeah, welcome everyone. So, a little background here. You know that inside of credit union land, the industry continues to change. There's declining in count over the years. This is an 11-year timeline, but we're growing in our reach, right? So, 2.6 trillion in assets, latest quarter's data, and then 162 million members that the credit union industry impacts. But we have to also look at the landscape for the board chair position, and this is looking at the data from the NCUA. And if you look at the last couple of years, and the only demographic information that is in the CU profile report is that there is a gender in there. And so we wanted to share with this is all credit unions over the last couple of years, and the progress, if you can say that, 21.8% representation for females in the chair position to 22.1% in the most recent data that we have available. Now, let's look at it over asset classes. And so asset classes, there are not great degrees of variance in terms of representation. So when we start thinking about board chair leadership, this is absolutely a variable that you should be looking at and considering. So we're going to talk about the roles and responsibilities, the stuff they don't tell you about.
Thank you, Peter. So what we're going to look at is ways that we can be more aware of what we call unconscious sabotage in the boardroom. You know, we think we've got a great agenda, for the board meeting, and sometimes there's a voice in the room that takes us off track and we get a bit sabotage and get more into the operational aspects versus the roles and responsibilities that were supposed to be strategic. We also want to say that the roles and responsibilities in boards are more similar than they're not similar, but what the dissimilarity actually can get us into trouble. So we want to be aware of how does my role need to be in this particular board, in this particular board meeting, or this situation, or this decision that we need to make. And so the board chair has to constantly pivot and change and increase awareness. So the incumbent, the one who's in the board chair role, actually needs to constantly be aware of how can I be a strong advocate to recruit board members? How can we facilitate progress going forward? How can we be visionary and be strategic and effectively execute and govern the organization? So there's a constant flow of strong leadership from the board chair that actually is getting more and more exciting as we get more complex in the industry. So the hardest part of the board chair role is managing people. You wouldn't think it would be, but managing several different perspectives in the room, people maybe from different backgrounds, or maybe we have board members who come from the same organization. But managing people to show up, be ready, and be prepared, do the work ahead of time to actually be that high-performing board member. We also want to look at how do we understand what the individual board member priorities are. Each of us comes into the room as a board member, and we have our own priority that sometimes may or may not align with what we need to do in the boardroom. The biggest thing that we're hearing is the lack of and the need for critical thinking and strategic dialogue in the boardroom. And we know with our work in the leadership realm is that the mid-level in the organization, right, in the organization itself, there's a big crisis in strategic and critical thinking that's impacting the executive team, and we also see it in the boardroom. So this is a phenomena that is huge in the industry. And what we're encouraging is that the board chair has a huge role, and sometimes they don't know it, that they have to be an advocate for strategic and critical thinking. There's constant alignment needs in the boardroom. You can't one and done it. You constantly have to be thinking about and looking at and paying attention to and discerning where we align and where we start to fracture or move apart from each other and bring back us into alignment. And then moving into decisions, sometimes we forget that we already made a decision. We already voted on it and we need to move forward. We need to constantly understand what our priorities are. So we still see some boards that will go back into history and say, well, I never agreed to that, or we made that decision in the past, and let's talk about it again. But we need to be very futuristic and keep going. The other thing is that more board chairs are saying, how do I hold my board members or the board members of our board accountable? How do they own what their roles and responsibilities are? So this is a tough job. It's extremely complex and requires some specific leadership needs. So here's some things we see from our research. Whoever's going to be board chair, before you step into the role, you need to have a clear understanding of what the board responsibilities are. If you are on the board and somebody says to you, hey, do you want to be the next board chair? Before you say yes, oh yeah, I'll do it. I've been around 12 years, it's my turn. You need to really have a clear understanding. What does this mean? If you just step in without understanding that, you can cause risk for the board, which causes risk for the organization. It sounds pedantic or too easy to even talk about, but the agenda has to be meaningful. Don't delegate that 100% to your CEO. You can co-create that with the CEO, but you are responsible for the board agenda, and the board agenda being highly strategic in nature. You do need to have constructive committees that make sense, not committees that just are there because they were there 10, 15 years ago. Every time you change your strategic planning cycle, you should go back and look at, do we have the right committees to help the organization move forward strategically? It's just not what was done before, it will work in the past. That's being an entrenched board, and we don't need that moving into the future. The other thing that we see is succession planning. In that board alignment assessment that I talked about earlier, one of the things that we see as a big opportunity or a challenge, however you want to look at it, is we still need stronger board succession planning processes. We also are really at a pandemic now as CEOs really leaving, and boards are not ready for the CEO to leave. Moving forward, once you get the strategic planning process in place, we need to have a robust onboarding process. We have some information on that as well, but we're not getting in that today. But we do need to move away from board members saying, oh, I'm only here 2 years, so I don't add value. My voice doesn't count. What I would like to see is in the 3 months, each new board member starting to add value. Enterprise risk management. I think it's a table stake. Board members need to understand all the areas of ERM. Again, we're not getting into that. You go to America's Council for what those are, and we can help you translate that into a board's need. But we have to understand what that means to us in making decisions. Constantly elevate our base level knowledge, constantly. What we talked about America's credit unions in terms of AI and PII and a number of other things should be in our lingo moving forward. So Chair, these are things that you need to be doing and be constantly aware of. Peter's going to take us into the board chair archetypes.
Yeah, I really like that, elevating the base level knowledge, because what it means is we can build on base level knowledge. We can advance the conversation as opposed to re-educating the conversation. And this is really important. If we're going to do more sophisticated strategies in the future, we need to continue to raise that bar. And that's a challenge for, or as Dee Dee said, an opportunity for the board chair. So as Dee Dee mentioned, we've got these board chair archetypes, and this is fun putting them together and talking through them. And by no way are these based on any particular clients or people we know in the industry. So the names have been changed and all of that. But all kidding aside, so we're going to walk through this content. We have 6 archetypes that we came up with, 6 general archetypes. For each of the archetypes, what we're going to do is outline for you these different parameters. What's the mindset? What's the action that could be? How are they interacting? What's the relationship that they might have with the CEO? What is their contribution to the board? And then where might they get themselves into trouble with this particular style, this particular archetype? These are not meant to be all-encompassing or mutually exclusive. You might have one or two of these as, mixed together, or on this board meeting there might be this archetype, and in another board meeting another different archetype might be manifesting. But here's one of the primary questions we want you to be in is, okay, as board chair, what does the organization need? What does the board need right now? What leadership do I need to emulate? So we're going to give you 6 to work through. And these are the archetypes. These are the icons, if you will. And we're going to talk through each of these here for a brief moment. So the first and foremost, I think this might be my favorite one that we came up with. We call it the policy and procedural wonk. Okay? So the mindset is rules-driven, detail-oriented, risk-averse. And so what that means is, okay, if we have the right policies, the right procedures, the right documentation, it's all nice and bundled and packaged, spell-checked, triplicate, put in triplicates, etc., we're going to be a high-performing board. Absolutely. If it's on paper, we are absolutely going to be high-performing. So the action, they can be very meticulous, analytical, and process-focused. The interaction is maybe cautious and questioning, data-driven. How does it fit inside of our model? So they're working through their thought process in that kind of way. The relationship with the CEOs absolutely can be very collaborative with well-defined boundaries to decision authority. The way that shows up is, okay, all right, we're in the board CEO relationship now when we're doing the process. Okay, number 1, okay, do you have any other questions, etc.? All right, board meeting, is adjourned. All right, now we can turn into Fun Peter, right? And all of a sudden there's a switch that happens. You can see that happen. But what their contribution, one of the ways their contribution can be measured is they are ensuring everyone is vetted, prepared, etc. They're working the process, they're working the framework. Of course, there's a liability. Any strength, there can be a liability. Any asset can also be a liability. And that the inflexibility to the policies and procedures can hinder or stifle innovation and might feel micromanagey to each other as a board, or maybe even to the CEO. And what maybe this can show up is the commitment to the purpose or the cause here will overshadow value and contribution. This one we call the evangelist, right? The evangelist, they carry the torch, they carry the flag. They're running, and they'll have that, make sure that fire is burning bright. So they're passionate and they're persuasive. One way I like to think about it is, if they have a tattoo, it might be the 7 cooperative principles are tattooed on their huge biceps. So what their actions are enthusiastic, communicative, optimistic, inclusive. They absolutely are out there in the industry and at the various conferences, and they know everyone, and they're definitely connecting people. Every single event representing the credit union and the cause. Even at the holidays, right, with their respective families, and they're talking about the credit union business and the great work that we're doing. So the relationship that they'll have with the CEO can be cooperative, collaborative, persuaded, and they can be persuaded, and they can be persuasive. Contribution, absolutely holding the members in their frame of mind, always and forever. They'll probably say the word members 10, 15 times in every single board meeting. How does this serve our members today. The liability, or how they might get in trouble, is they can be impulsive, overlooks risks, maybe focusing on the vision over details. We got to do this for the membership. Sometimes what we've seen is maybe what is best for the membership today might be at the expense of the membership in the future. And that's a liability. That's something, and that's a strategic conversation to be focused on. So the third archetype here, we call this the sage, and they rely on decades of experience, and they freely offer what they might couch as guidance, and sometimes you take it as guidance and sometimes you take it as directives, and this is the way that we need to do it. Their interaction is absolutely measured and authoritative. And we don't mean authoritative in a bad way, but they're speaking with authority because they've been there, they've done it, they know how this might show up. We've been tested and successfully come out the other side. They have that perspective, and so I'm going to offer this to you as you're making these decisions. The CEO relationship, they will help the CEO navigate the political landscape. And I don't mean the political or actual governmental politics, but more the dynamics in the boardroom. They may even indirectly and subtly offer that kind of guidance. And so if you're the CEO, you have to pick up, oh, was that them giving me a hint on how to potentially avoid a landmine? So the contribution, they know that a decision that we all agree on will absolutely stand the test of time. It's better, so they're going to be working towards building that consensus. They also freely and frequently offer historic perspectives. They will remind you as to how we did this back in 1979. So the liability, they might be overly seasoned. New ideas are especially risky, especially with the landscape changing so quickly. Remember, I said earlier, we've been there, we've done this, we've come out the other side. So why should we change? Well, the landscape may be different than what it was before, and so there's definitely a conversation to be had there. That might also show up for other board members, maybe even the CEO, maybe even the executive team members, as dismissive of new ideas. So that's a liability. All right, the hawk. The hawk, you can even see it there, very discerning. Knowledgeable, decisive, results-oriented. They speak with authority, direct, assertive. They can dictate their decisions. You absolutely know where they feel that things should and maybe even will go, declaratively. They run a tight ship. You know, the meeting, if it's scheduled to end at 5 p.m., you better believe that at 4:55 they are reminding us that we have 4 minutes left on the timetable. So they run a tight ship. And this may sound like, in terms of action, is, okay, we've been there, we've done that, and I'm going to help you get the objective that we're trying to get towards. The relationship with the CEO, maybe everything is laced with a bit of urgency, right? And the CEO knows that when there's an email that comes in, they better get on it, right? And respond back to that. They're not afraid to make management decisions too, and help the CEO make that decision, which can be a liability as well. That contribution, they can absolutely provide strong leadership when there is turmoil, when there's uncertainty, when there's a pandemic happening, when there's a dramatic change, or there's regulators that are coming in and you know, dropping our camel ratio. We need that strong leadership. We need someone that ensures accountability and drives results in the time frame that we're committed to. The liability, you've already heard it from me here, is they might be a know-it-all. They might be impervious to new ideas, and that can be domineering and stifling dissent. They may even reward acquiescence, right? Oh, so-and-so, you're going to come along quickly here, you know, once you learn how we run these, how we run things here. What that can be is, for other directors, is, well, I want to stay off of that hawk's radar, and so I'm going to go along with the program. And they may not even realize that that's a decision that they're making as the other directors, but it can be a liability. Okay, the empowerer. Management are the experts. That's the mindset, right? So they want to empower, and there's a very clear line of authority and governance here, and they empower the CEO and management to make the decisions and often refer to them as the experts. And so they will frequently ensure that they are not going to be a bottleneck. No, we don't need to be in that. I don't need to be in that decision. You're empowered to work through this kind of content. And the interaction is, all right, hey, I'm going to be out of these conversations, and so you committees are good to work through these. And what can happen is maybe the interaction will show up, maybe even a detached or aloof, when maybe we want more of an engagement. So the relationship with the CEO, if there's trust present there, there is implicit authority granted to the CEO, and the CEO, the board meeting. Again, it's in the name, it's the board's meeting, but it might even be the CEO's meeting. There might be a lot of trust given to the board there. Given to the CEO there. The contribution, even if the board chair is maybe even, for whatever reason, unprepared, they might still have very thoughtful and valuable insights to offer on the relevant discussions, right? Just because they may be an empowerer doesn't mean that they can't add value, and then boom, all of a sudden, wow, that was something we didn't expect or anticipate, but that was excellent. So the liability here is that progress can be slow and or choppy because there are things that the board chair needs to weigh in. We need that insight, we need that perspective, and if they are feeling like I'm empowering the committees or the rest of the board, et cetera, or the CEO, but yet the board chair needs to weigh in, then progress can be slow, and that can be frustrating to the CEO and or other board members. So the last one here, we call it the strategic navigator, future mindset, future-oriented, adaptable, absolutely an abstract thinker. Their action, they ensures comprehensive and holistic plans are developed. They will help and make sure, well, have you thought about these unintended consequences? What about these obstacles? How are you going to address these navigational and marketplace challenges? And so their interaction with the board is, we're not talking about the past unnecessarily, we're talking about the future. Yes, the past, we can have it inform our future discussions, but we need to be future focused and where we're trying to go. We're not going to relitigate anything that might have already been decided. So the relationship, collaborative, and boy, do they keep the CEO on their toes. This helps CEOs get better. CEOs that have a strategic navigator as their board chair, they come prepared, they think broadly, they think abstractly, and that helps them become a better leader. So the contribution to the board is they will guide the strategic conversations. I mean, it's very rare that we'll have a board not say, will we have enough strategic, I don't know if I'm saying that right. Most boards that we work with say, we want more strategic dialogue in our board meetings. And so with a strategic navigator at the helm of the board, absolutely, they'll guide us into that conversation. So the liability side of it is, great as a strategic navigator sounds, they might be so futuristic that we might miss some details. They might be pushing for that vision, but lack operational realities. Why can't we do X? We've got this extra capital, we can do these things. Well, because of so many reasons, it's just not feasible, or this vision may not be based in reality. The other liabilities, they might be change for change's sake. All right, so here's what we want you to do. So we hit these high points here. We want you to have a discussion in your boardroom here. And so these are some of the questions. Which archetypes are familiar to you? Meaning, in this current credit union board, or maybe in your life, can you put a name and a face to the archetype? Well, what's the impact of that? What are the short and long-term implications of this? What type was needed 5 years ago? And I'm going to ask you to think about it like this. What if we would have embraced a different archetype 5 years ago? How would things have been different today? And then, of course, we just said future focused. Which types might be needed for the next 5 years? And so these are not, 30-second dialogues here. These are discussions about our board succession, our board evolution. How do we elevate our impact? And as Didi said earlier, that's the board chair's responsibility.
Peter, before we go to the next slide, I'm going to go back a little bit here. Do you think a board chair can shift from one archetype to another situationally?
Absolutely. That's required in great leaders, right? We have to make sure that the context of the situation, I have to understand the context. I have to go, look, in this board meeting, we're going to talk about board succession. It's going to require this one, maybe a little bit more tact. And maybe in the strategic dialogue, I need to approach this other kind of leadership archetype.
And I know you said the policy and procedure wonk was your favorite.
That's my favorite.
Which board or archetype are you seeing most prevalent in the last year?
Well, I'll say that the ones that are forwarding the progress in their own kind of way is, the strategic navigator, I'll say, maybe is the one that is needed most. But I'll tell you, sometimes the policy and procedure wonk, we need to get the base level pieces in place. What are you saying?
I'm seeing a lot of the sage. There's the chairs that are been there for a long time, 20, 25 years, are actually starting to exit. And sometimes they don't want to make a big decision or a big change before they go. They just want everything to be peaceful, to have a really strong legacy. So it's a mix. It's a mix there. It's kind of exciting to look at it.
There's a final question I forgot to mention, and excuse our transitions of the slides here. What are the consequences of not enacting that type over the next 5 years? What do you think about that? If board chairs don't look at their own leadership, what are the consequences we're facing over the next 5 years?
Well, the big thing is there's such a huge change in CEO leadership right now. We're seeing a large number, 30 to 40% of board members changing. And for every CEO leaving, we've got a couple executives leaving. So it's a huge tsunami of change. So we need to pay attention to the consequences. We need to be intentional about who's going to be in that chair. And if not, it is a huge risk to the organization. It can bifurcate and trifurcate a board, create dysfunctionality, slow things down, not attract the highest CEO. There's a number of different situations or risks there, Peter.
Yeah. And it goes back to leaders are really made in the fire, right?
Right.
In times of change, as opposed to it's 72 degrees outside, the rainbows are out. And,
everything's fine.
I got a full belly full of nice food. That's not when leaders are made. Leaders are made when the challenges are there.
Absolutely, and that's where we say we do need to have a progressive mindset in the board chair, right? Is we need to make sure that we're not in what we call a fixed mindset. We need to work in this box, so we need to be progressive. There's a whole school of work on that. We're looking at exceptional commitment to thought and action, and I know some of these statements we're putting out here are subjective or qualitative, but if you want to assign or ask or request somebody to be a board chair, I think we need to go back and look at what's their record of being committed to thought and action. That is exceptional, and can they actually do that in the future? I think there's a certain kind of energy that we need in the board chair to keep people going, keep board members engaged, especially new board members. And this whole piece around compelling leadership, we're seeing boards ask for compelling leadership in their CEO, and we'd love to see more of that in the boardroom, particularly in the chair job. So it's organizing the board around a vision for the board, which is different than the vision for the organization. What is the board's vision of itself for the future, and how will they know that they're holding themselves accountable to that? And that's a piece of work that takes some time. I would also say that to do this kind of work and elevate the board thinking and the different officers, particularly the chair role, is that the board does need its own strategic development day every year by themselves to do their own work, to do this deep work. The other thing that I really would like to see more of is personal integrity. Sometimes we see something that needs to change, yet we don't have the wherewithal to make it change or the courage or resilience to make the change. And like Peter said, we have to step into the fire to bring out that leadership potential. We also need board chairs to hold other board members accountable. It's a good time to go back and look at position descriptions. How do we know we're accountable? What do we own? What are the decisions we need to make? And when we make a decision, are we acting as one voice? And really stop that discord before it starts and runs rampant in a boardroom, which will impact the organization. Appropriately challenge and support the CEO. CEOs want their chairs to hold them accountable, to be supportive in a relevant kind of way. It doesn't mean we have to be nice all the time, but actually look at how the CEO holds themselves accountable and how does that align with how you hold the CEO accountable. Those are deep discussions. There's some really good 3 or 4 questions that you could be dialoguing there with the CEO. Keep encouraging and guide the board into the future. Keep looking forward, futuristic thinking, strategic and critical thinking. It's huge. Look at your vision for your board 5 years in the future, and what are you doing now as a board to get there? Step into that conflict resolution fast. Don't let it fester. That's not going to be helpful. If you need support, get a third party to help facilitate that dialogue, but step into it and keep moving forward. Peter, is anything else you want to add there?
Well, there's a lot of training out there, men and women in uniform. The answer is inside the conflict, right? We run towards the conflict. And if we have a habit or a trained skill of avoiding the conflict, doesn't mean the conflict's going to go away or the problem's going to go away. And so we have to move towards that. And that is one of when we work through that process, as you know, boards go, okay, that was uncomfortable, but
we got it done.
That we got that done. Wow, now we can have different conversations. Excellent.
They build new muscle, new competencies for the future.
They grew.
Absolutely. Do you want to take us through the end?
Yeah, so hopefully this gives you something to work towards. Hopefully we gave you some thoughts that you can run with and challenge yourself to continue to grow and learn as a board chair. So other learning resources, takeaways here we have, you can click the slides, it'll take you to the 10 tools we have for board development, referencing them on our website. Other ones is the board alignment assessment. There's a couple other board alignment articles available here. And we talk about CEO performance evaluations, the hallmarks of a great CEO evaluation. And last but not least, again, I'm Peter Myers, and this is DD Myers. Reach out to us if you have questions, comments, and complaints and suggestions. We want to hear your thoughts. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you, Peter.
You're welcome.